If you look back on your life, I wonder where you learned your lessons about what it means to show up in the world for others and find out who you are, what your value is. I look back on my childhood, the stories I learned in churches or school, the stories I read, and see mixed and complicated messages about what healthy relationships and finding oneself looks like. One story that stands out to me is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. I've got a complicated relationship with that book now. When I was a kid, I loved that story, that classic story about the relationship between a young boy and a tree. It starts off simple enough. As a young boy, he goes and sits in the shade of the tree and climbs into her branches to rest and play. Innocently enough, at first, he begins to pick her apples and sell them, but continues a pattern of using her and cutting away at her. He comes back and cuts off her branches to make his home. After the branches are cut away, he comes and cuts down her trunk to build a boat. And at each stage, it says that the tree's reaction to being cut away is that she's happy. Eventually, she's reduced to a stump. When the boy comes back, an old man, she actually apologizes to him that she has nothing left to give. The boy, now the man's response to her is that it's okay. He's too old to climb her branches anyway, that he doesn't need her branches to build a house, and that he's really too old to go sailing in his boat. All he wants to do is have a place to sit and rest, and she will be good enough for that. It can seem like a virtue, continually giving of oneself to someone else or something else, of the idea that that self-sacrifice is a good in and of itself. Or it can look like being cut away over and over again. I think in our world we're taught models of what good relationship and virtue and spiritual growth looks like that often looks like the martyr being cut away at with nothing left to give. To me, finding oneself and spiritual growth might look a lot more like a training montage from a boxing movie. A prize fighter preparing for the fight of their life with an arch nemesis or a fight that makes up from some episode in their childhood. You watch them training on the mat, battling not their opponent, but themselves. There's a different kind of pain and struggle in that narrative. Yes, there's blood and tears and sweat left on the mat. There's a grimacing face in pain, wondering if you can make it. The weight of true weights or your own body, the pain and struggle that comes with training. But in the end, win or lose, the fighter finds themselves. The fighter grows. The hero of the story is not cut away at and does not disappear. In fact, they grow stronger and empowered, and whether they win or lose the fight, they find and do not lose themselves. We're taught many messages about how to use struggle in our lives. Whether to accept all of it that comes our way, whether to use it to grow, what's acceptable. And the path that you choose, what you determine is acceptable or normal in life, what struggle you invite into your life and what struggle you cast away, whether or not you give yourself away like being cut apart, or whether even in struggle and fight you train to grow strong and empower yourself, what decision you make about that approach will change the course of your life. In Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, that we read in worship this morning, she talks about what it means to find or lose ourselves because we define who we are based on external identities. A job, a religion, a career, a family, a set of rules, or an old self that should be left by the wayside. For her, she looks back on life and determines that in the moments when she felt found or lost, it was whether she understood herself to be the tree rooted or defined by the woods around her. She wrote, "I've spent much of my life in the woods of pain, relationships, career, religion, service, success, and failure. Looking back on those times, I can trace my lostness back to a decision to make something outside of myself my touch tree. An identity, a set of beliefs, an institution, aspirational ideas, a job, another person, a list of rules, approval, or an old version of myself. When we face the inevitable struggles of life, the inevitable changes and challenges that come from simply being human, we can either be cut away by them, disappear so that someone else outside of ourself is benefited, or we can be rooted and grow, with the challenges of life acting like compost that feed us and empower us and teach you who you truly are, and it all depends on what model you follow. You see, just like the giving tree versus the prize fighter in the movie, we're taught competing narratives about who we're supposed to become to be virtuous. Growing up, the model of Jesus that I think so many of us understood and learned looked like a person who was being cut away at for the benefit of others, and that was the virtue. We look at stories of the Buddha or ascetics in the woods who look emaciated and have to almost disappear in the flesh in order to become enlightened. I think we are too easily taught the virtue of a martyr over a fighter preparing and training for life. It's easy to misunderstand the lessons that come from people like Jesus or the Buddha. We look at them both sitting for 40 days in the wilderness in their own woods, attempting to begin their work in the world, fighting demons who ask, "Who do you think you are?" tempting them with worldly delights or power. And some of us believe that they got to be who they were, that they gained virtue or enlightenment, that they at least grew up by denying themselves for the world. I see something very different happening in those stories. I don't see spiritual teachers who became enlightened because they denied themselves for the world, but people who faced real struggle and found who they were. People who at the end of their wrestling in the woods said, "I know what is holy and precious to me. My feet are more firmly planted than they've ever been." People who grew and were empowered, who had a sense of self and mission but did not disappear. In traditional Christian theology, the goal is incarnation, not disappearance. It's the idea that God wanted to be present in the material things of the world. In progressive religion, the idea is that the matter of this earth is good, and so are you. If the world is good, if God is found in the stuff of the world, in the trees, in the stars, in your bones, in your flesh, if you are good just as you are, then why do so many of us believe that we have to disappear for other people's desires or wants? Not all challenges and struggles are made equal in this world. Some challenge looks like training. It's painful, and you sweat, you leave blood on the mat, and you don't know whether you will win or lose, but you end up stronger and more grounded than you ever were at the beginning. And some struggle, if it continually benefits others, if you're being chipped away or cut at, or you feel like you have to disappear in the midst of it in order to please someone else, looks more like abuse. We too often believe that our approach to difficulty and challenge has to be either avoiding it at all costs or just accepting what comes to us, believing that all of it is for our good. You can run towards struggle that empowers you. Whether it's 40 days or 40 years in the wilderness of your life. You can run toward relationships that are challenging and robust and sometimes cause pain, but leave you feeling like your back is straightened and you are strong and good. Run toward the struggle that leaves you stronger and more empowered. And if you're in a relationship or a sense of self and identity, or a relationship to struggle that leaves you feeling like you have to disappear, you have permission to walk away as a virtue too. We are so often taught the archetype of martyr as a virtue. That many of us lead our lives playing disappearing acts for other people's feelings or goods, being chipped away at like that tree, apologizing that we have nothing left to give. The blood on the mat, the sweat, the tears or the pain, the being forced under the weight of training can be a good thing. Taking punches, fighting hard, finding a sense of self can be a good thing that leaves you stronger and more found. Or those punches and blood on the mat and sweat and tears can be for somebody else's benefit. I wonder what would happen if you took an inventory of your own life and your relationship to struggle and others. Where have you chosen to disappear? Where have you apologized because you had nothing left to give? And where have you found yourself training for the next chapter of life, training for a new sense of empowerment and responsibility and self-worth? It's important to use the stuff of life as compost, something that grows us and doesn't cut away. Use your life as training. You get to decide. When you approach a struggle in your life over and over again, or when you find that something is challenging or difficult, you can always ask, what is this teaching me about what I value? What is precious and good and holy to me? What do I feel like running toward? And you can always walk away from the struggle that cuts at you and makes you disappear. You can be your own touch tree. You can discover what God desires in this world and the material good of your bones and your flesh. You can find God and find the holy in the midst of struggle if it teaches you what's real and good. And you'll know it's a good struggle. When you walk away, your back is a little taller and straight. If you feel a little bit more sense of yourself, and even if your muscles ache, if you feel like you are ready for what comes next. You don't ever have to lose yourself to encounter the holy. In fact, if you choose the right struggle, if you run toward the pain that empowers you and challenges you and helps you grow, you will never lose yourself again. May it be so, and amen.